Nmaktima'S under the lamp. How's it going, everybody? Got another tying video for you guys. Today we're gonna just kind of do a classic, but also show you a little tying technique that'll help improve your flies, hopefully, and give it a little bit more life. We're gonna look at tying the hare's ear. Really, we're gonna strip it down, the fundamentals of a hare's ear. So just the material, and then breaking down the basic anatomy of a fly or the insect. So we're looking at tail, abdomen, slight thorax. Really, that's it. You know, we'll let the material cover the legs and whatnot, but also tying it in the round. So when you're fishing, it doesn't matter how it's manipulated in the current. It always has a good solid profile. This isn't unlike a waltz worm. However, when I tied this pattern initially, it was before I even heard of a waltz worm. So it's slightly more elaborate than a waltz worm, but not as elaborate as your traditional hare's ear, if that makes any sense. So yeah, we'll get into this and show you what we got going on. Come along. All right, in the vise we have the Umpqua XE400 in a size 12, so obviously a jig hook, pretty good hook that I've been liking a lot these days. And as far as the bead, we're running 4mm gold slotted beads. Pretty heavy fly in a size 12. This one is intended, as far as this side, as pretty much my anchor fly. So but I do tie these down into a 16. And one thing with this one, I'm not going to add any lead wire. You can add lead wire to give it more weight, although I find not all that necessary. It does sink pretty rapidly. So we're going to use Semperfli Nano Silk in a 30 denier, which is about 18 knot. Super strong thread. I just started tying with this, even though I've had this spool thread for some time. Very impressed with it. So go ahead and get that started on the hook. Trim away your tag. We are going to use, we are going to tie in a tail, so we're going to use some mallard flank. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of get this cleaned up here. This is a nice feather because I can actually utilize both sides. Get that cleaned away. We don't need a ton of this material. It's really the effect of a tail. And this stuff's pretty sparse or thin, I should say. And doesn't need to be super perfect as far as getting any of the tips lined up or anything. So, but if you can line them up somewhat, it'll make the fly look a little neater. So just kind of preening it away from the stem, pull the stem away, and just sort of get these somewhat lined up. Now the tail I want about the length of the fly itself. So we're going to go ahead and get our estimated length, lay that down on there, and that's about right. So it's going to look a little long, draw that in just a bit, and then get that set there. All right, we're going to add a couple of components into the body itself. We're going to actually tie in some mono. So just using some monofilament on a spool. You can use tippet material, whatever, 6X works perfect. I just have this tying mono around and need to use it. So a couple turns just to hold that down. And then we're going to go ahead and tie in some silky pearl as my rib. Now you can see I cut some here and it's really curly. So what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of hold it, and in the opposite direction the curl is, I'm going to use my thumbnail, not a whole lot of pressure, and just somewhat uncurl it, and that way it's a lot more manageable when I tie it in. And go ahead and tie that in. Both of those are on my side. So if you notice, I tied the monofilament in first and then the sulky in after. The sulky is going to get ribbed or layered down first, and then the mono will come over on top of it, cross wrap, so that way it helps secure it and reinforces it. Go ahead and wrap your thread towards the bend of the hook, binding everything down all the way to the bend there. Just let it sit. Now for the body, this is a hare's ear, so we are going to tie in some hare's ear dubbing, just natural, nothing fancy about it. And we're going to give ourselves a decent little clump. I do want to create a taper with this material, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of get this prepped. That might be even a little more. No, that's about right. And you can always use more. If you have too much or it looks like you have too much, you can always just strip that back away. And let's go ahead. So I prepped it in a linear type of mat. I'm going to go ahead and just start dubbing it onto my thread. And then push everything up. Actually, one thing I forgot to do, got excited about this, is go ahead and trim all this, your excess tail material. And I'm going to go ahead and just pinch that, get that a little tighter up there, and then go ahead and start wrapping and building your body with the hare's ear. Just wrapping forward, make sure each turn is touching the turn before, and you can see it's getting a little thick, which is fine. You're building the body anyway, but it'll tend to start to expand out on you, and that's good. Just a slight taper, nothing too crazy. I'm going to go ahead and take my sulky now, and with this one I'm going to go ahead and actually counter rib. So I'm coming from underneath and over towards me as I wrap. Oh, lost it. A little tough. I got the camera in between me and the fly. Okay, and then just come up towards the bead. Now if you notice, I came in front of the thread, and now the thread is always going up and over the top away from me. So I do one across the sulky. Remember, the sulky's in front on my right of the thread, so I'll bring that over the top, and then one in front. So I did that twice already, so I can go ahead and just trim this one away. Put that to the side, use it again. Now with my mono, a little strand of monofilament here, nylon, whatever it is, we're going to wrap normally, and that's going to counter wrap over the top of the sulky. The sulky, you know, isn't all that durable against trout teeth, so adding a little mono reinforcements will keep it from ripping out as soon as, you know, one or two fish get a hold of it. Now, in a sense, you know, it will eventually, but it gives you a few more fish to wrangle with. Now you can see I have some of these little random strands out here. I'm not worried about them. Just leave them in there. Again, it's all about adding some life and characteristic components to your fly. Excuse me, like need a burp. All right, so with this one, I'm just going to show you the quick and easy way to do the collar. We're going to go ahead and use some SLF Squirrel Brown Olive, just a little pinch, some of that. So can't really tell, but that's what we got. Dub that on there. You can dub it loose, and that'll help kind of allow it to flare out. And then we can go ahead and just dub that right to the back of the bead. And before we whip finish, I am going to add some UV resin onto the thread itself and just touch the brush to the thread. And using the extended whip finisher, so this is a longer one, we'll go ahead and whip finish. So you always whip finish the thread with the UV resin on it. I have seen a few folks do it, and it ends up on somewhere back here or on this one, and as you go through the motions, it rubs off on the arms of the whip finisher. And with that, I'm just going to go ahead and do a couple more. That was not nice or pretty at all. Just do a couple more. Okay. Promise the next one will be a little cleaner. And then trim your tag with that. So as you can see, nice thin profile. Because of the thin profile here, I'm just going to go ahead and trim those down. I know I said earlier I wouldn't worry about them, but in keeping with the profile of the fly. So, fairly buggy, decent looking fly. Um, Not bad. I'd still fish it. And all right, let's show you the dubbing loop method. Okay, so we got a new fly in the vise. I tied it all the way up to the point where we're gonna do the thorax now. So one thing I forgot to mention in the last one is I did wrap my Hare'S ear dubbing all the way up to the back of the bead. We don't need much of a collar, and at the same time, with the other technique or the previous technique I just did, you can build up or layer up on top of the Hare'S ear dub with the collar dubbing, the squirrel SLF squirrel dubbing. All right, so again, we're going to utilize the SLF brown olive squirrel in the dubbing loop here. So I'm just going to take a small pinch. You don't need a ton, like that's way too much. Let's go ahead and get about half of that going there. So about that much, and usually I try to again get in a somewhat of a linear mat. If I can get at least 2 turns out of this material, that's perfect. So we're going to go ahead and actually I'm going to zoom out here. Okay, so I zoomed out. You'll see I lengthen out my thread here, so it's much longer. And what I'm going to do, keep lengthening out until I can get a dubbing loop formed. Now my dubbing loop's about 3 inches long, and basically I just put it at my fingertip, bring my thread around up over the top of the fly, and then I spin my thread, my bobbin thread, around the dubbing loop and come over the top. You only need to do that once. I've seen a lot of folks do it a bunch of times. It really is just securing it and holding the dubbing loop in place. Once you tie it off, that really holds the dubbing loop and secures it. So I'm going to take that little chunk of dubbing that I set aside, set that in there, and then take my dubbing whirler. I'm just going to get my fingers out of there. So I got that guy. Obviously it spins. Set that into the dubbing loop. You can kind of see that out of focus, but nonetheless. And then actually I want that to sit right up by the fly. Kind of slip back down. And then go ahead and spin that so it tightens up the dubbing into the dubbing whirler. From this point, take a little Velcro strip and tease out some of that material. Gets it real nice and thick and fluffy. And now you have a lot of that material splayed out. And we'll go ahead and just wrap that right at the back of the collar. Now one thing I want to do, just like you saw with the ecstasy egg and the yarn, is bring that material back towards the tail, and that'll create a palmer type effect. So again, just a couple good turns. Notice I probably had a little more than necessary, but that's about all you'll need. So go ahead and just tie that off. A couple in front as well. And I didn't cut with the scissor tip. And open the scissor tip, just push through. Now if you notice, now you got a nice collar, a lot of movement. Yeah, you can trim that down if you want, but looks good right there. Okay, so at this point, go ahead and once again, take my resin, touch it to the thread with the brush, take the extended whip finisher. Let's see if I can do this with a little more professionalism than last time. Boom, get your 2 sets in there. Open the scissor tip, push through, let the scissor blade cut, not the motion of closing the scissor, and then hit it with the UV light. All right, so there you go. There's your Hare'S ear with the dubbing loop technique. Okay, so there you have the Hare'S ear with the dubbing loop. Real nice and fluffy, full of movement, especially if you were to get this wet. It definitely would breathe and move with the water current, and compared to the one without the dubbing loop, you can definitely see the thinner profile difference. may not make a whole lot of difference to fish. However, if they are keyed into some breathability or movement in the fly, that may trigger them to take it a little bit more willing than not. So anyway, that's the difference between a dubbing loop and non-dubbing loop. It just depends on what effect or what you want your profile of the fly to look like, or convenience and speed. This one definitely takes a little longer than tying this one. So anyway, hope that helps you, and look out for more tying tutorials in the Under the Lamp playlist. All right, guys, hope you're all doing well. You know where to find me: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Nmaktima'S Fly Fishing, as well as Patreon. All right, take care, y'all. Have a good one.